The ancient Greeks named the vast ocean after Atlas, the titan who carried the sky itself on his shoulders. In their cultural myths, the unknowable waters to the west of Gibraltar were associated with danger and death, although some of the legends also told of island paradises where harmony and hope ruled. The perils of that same vast sea, by now called the Atlantic, were still well known in 1941. The sailors, merchant marines, and naval forces who dared navigate Atlas's ocean faced not only its fierce storms, but also the sudden violence of warfare. Throughout that last year of peace for the United States, some 215 Americans lost their lives in the cold Atlantic waters. But the Atlantic Ocean also gave witness to hope in 1941. That August, just off the island of Newfoundland, the leaders of two great nations met to forge a pact that would inspire much of the world. They called it the Atlantic Charter. It was a pivotal moment in the course of World War II, and it continues to influence the world today, over 75 years later. The Charter emerged in a desperate context. By the end of 1940, Adolf Hitler's Nazi forces had overrun Belgium, Denmark, Luxembourg, and France, forced British forces into a desperate evacuation at Dunkirk, and devastated the English homeland in the Blitz. The new Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, considered it the darkest hour, and indeed it seemed as if the British Empire was now alone in its struggle against tyranny.
Starting in the spring of 1940, the war in Europe turned out to be one victory after another for the Nazis. After the German blitzkrieg essentially vanquished all opposition on continental Europe, Great Britain was left alone to face the full fury of Hitler's attack. It was truly a perilous time.
Across the Atlantic, many Americans found themselves advocating for a forceful intervention on behalf of the British. But some 800,000 isolationists were insistent that the United States should not entangle itself in this foreign affair.
Without a declaration of war,
President Franklin D. Roosevelt, at that point running for a third term in office, was mindful of accusations that he was eager for battle. He wisely pledged that no American boys would be sent into any foreign wars.
In 1940, FDR was facing a very complicated situation, unprecedented running for a third term. America was an isolationist nation. A majority of Americans didn't want to get involved in what they considered a European war.
The neutrality laws allowed belligerent nations to purchase American arms, but only on a cash-and-carry basis. Britain, quickly running out of funds while resisting the Nazis, was by late 1940 in severe financial distress.
In the fall of 1940, Winston Churchill sent FDR a long letter, and he revealed that Britain had exhausted its ability to pay for American arms. He pointed out that a Nazi victory over Britain was in no way in the interest of the United States, and he pleaded for the president's assistance in any other way.
Roosevelt responded with his Lend-Lease proposal, envisioning America as an arsenal of democracy that would continue to arm Britain in its fight.
He came up with the whole Lend-Lease concept. And of course, his great justification for this was the example. He said, well, if your neighbor's house is on fire and he comes over to borrow a hose, you're not going to sell him the hose. You're going to give him the hose and let him use it to put out his house fire. And then when the fire is out, if the hose is damaged, he'll give you a new one. And if not, he'll just return the hose to you. So we're going to do the same thing with the British.
The president relied on one of his most trusted aides, Harry Hopkins, to usher the Lend-Lease proposal through Congress. But Hopkins was convinced that the nation needed to do even more for the British. He persuaded Roosevelt that a personal meeting with Churchill was essential. In July 1941, FDR sent Hopkins to London to suggest a secret rendezvous. Churchill accepted immediately. The meeting would take place near Ship Harbor, Newfoundland, on the east coast of Canada. It was top secret. Churchill would be passing through waters where German U-boats patrolled, so he could not afford to make his plans public. The White House played its part, announcing what was described as a weekend fishing trip for the president. The two leaders finally met on August 9th, as Churchill made his way to the Augusta to call on the American president. All who were there to witness the meeting knew it was a historic moment. The two leaders greeted each other warmly, then set to work. Roosevelt had previously suggested that they should collaborate on a joint statement to reflect common goals of the two nations, and it was the aims and wording of this statement that seized their full attention. The pivotal moment during the meetings came on the second day, a Sunday, when Roosevelt made the difficult journey to the Prince of Wales for a unified worship service. Both sides enthusiastically sang hymns together, with the Union Jack and the Stars and Stripes hanging side by side. It was clear that a mutual understanding was developing. As the president later told his son Elliot, "If nothing else had happened while we were here, that would have cemented us." On the fourth day, the leaders were able to take stock of their intense efforts. With its 8 clauses, their joint statement, soon to be known worldwide as the Atlantic Charter, offered a vision of a new post-war world that would be rid once and for all of ruthless dictators, that would disarm belligerents, that would privilege the self-determination of citizens, and would call for morality and rational thought in international affairs. It was a monumental achievement in a world that desperately needed hope.
And Roosevelt became a mighty name in a world that went to war. Meeting with Winston Churchill off Newfoundland in August 1941, the president aligned the power and prestige of the United States on the side of the democratic nations, fighting a vicious combination of fascist powers. Together, Roosevelt and Churchill issued a statement that came to be known as the Atlantic Charter, proclaiming to the world those guiding principles of freedom on which they were firmly united.
Tellingly, Roosevelt's 4 freedoms played a central role in the Charter's language. Freedom of speech and religion, the president believed, were part of its spirit, while both parties found it important to specifically feature freedom from want and freedom from fear as post-war goals. Their work done, on August 14th, the president and the prime minister returned to their homelands. Soon, 15 other nations announced that they too supported the Atlantic Charter. Pledges made official after Pearl Harbor at the Arcadia Conference, where more than 24 nations affirmed the Charter as a post-war vision in a United Nations declaration.
God of the free,
28 nations stand united until victory is won.
cause of all mankind. Grant us victory over the tyrants who would enslave all free men and nations. Grant us a common faith that man shall know bread and peace, that he shall know justice and righteousness, freedom and security, an equal opportunity and an equal chance to do his best, not only in our own lands, but throughout the world. And in that faith, let us march toward the clean world our hands can make. Amen.
And so emerged the first tentative signs of the United Nations itself, formally ratified in late 1945 after the dictators had finally been defeated. The new organization was the logical outcome of the far-seeing collaboration between Roosevelt and Churchill on that windy bay off the Atlantic Ocean in 1941. Today, the UN headquarters looks out on the vast Atlantic, the turbulent body of water named by the ancient Greeks for Atlas himself. In its mission to bring nations together and to prevent catastrophic wars, the UN is a fitting echo of those mythical islands of hope foretold in the old legends. And so, while the UN's origins in the Atlantic Charter of 1941 may have been lost in popular memory, the hope that it embodied, a hope that Roosevelt and Churchill willed into being, lives on.